My name is Saran, and I'm 26 years old. The day my life cracked open started like any other Tuesday until my bank app sent a notification that made my stomach drop so hard I had to sit down on the kitchen floor. According to the alert, my credit score had plummeted overnight. I thought it had to be some kind of mistake, maybe a glitch or identity check. But when I logged in and opened the loan section, my hands began shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. There it was in cold numbers. $89,000 in loans tied to my name. Not one loan, several personal loans, a line of credit, even a financing account I had never applied for. My first thought was simple and terrifying. Someone had stolen my identity. I spent the next hour calling banks, verifying accounts, and every call ended with the same chilling confirmation. The loans were legitimate applications submitted with my personal information, my ID copies, and my signature, except I had never signed anything. When the Clear's Throat Bank agent casually mentioned the contact number attached to one of the applications, my heart stopped. It was my sister's phone number. My younger sister, Liana, the same sister who had asked me a few months earlier if she could borrow pictures of my driver's license for a rental form because she had lost hers temporarily. I remember laughing and saying sure because she was. Family, that tiny moment replayed in my head like a slow-motion car crash. My sister didn't just borrow my ID. My sister stole my identity and took out $89,000 in loans under my name. I wish I could say the worst part was discovering that, but it wasn't. The worst part was what happened when I told my parents. I drove straight to their house, shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief, holding printed statements like evidence. In a courtroom, Liana was already there, sitting at the kitchen table, looking oddly calm. My mother didn't look shocked when I laid the papers down. She just sighed like I was bringing up an annoying inconvenience. I remember my voice trembling as I said, she used my identity. She took out $89,000 in loans under my name. My mom rubbed her temples and said words that still echo in my head. She needed the money more than you. Stop being so selfish. I thought I had misheard her. I kept staring at her, waiting for the real reaction to start. The anger, the disbelief, anything normal. But instead, my father leaned forward and delivered the sentence that made something inside me snap. He said slowly and clearly, if you go to the police, we'll tell them you gave her permission. Just like that, like it had been rehearsed. That was when I realized something far worse than identity theft had happened. This wasn't Liana acting alone. My parents had helped her, encouraged her, maybe even planned it. I turned to my sister, hoping stupidly that she would deny it or at least look ashamed out instead. She picked up a folded piece of paper from the table and began reading in the most awkward robotic voice I had ever heard. It sounded like a school presentation. She said things like, Karina agreed to help me during financial hardship, and the loans were a family understanding. That was the moment the truth clicked in my mind like a lock opening. My parents gave my sister a script to swindle $89K. From me, they had actually written out what she should say in case I confronted them. The whole thing felt surreal, like I had walked into a play where everyone knew their lines except me. I looked around that kitchen, the same kitchen where we had birthdays and holidays growing up, and suddenly it felt like a stranger's house. I realized they weren't afraid of what they had done. They were confident that family pressure, guilt, and intimidation would keep me quiet. My father crossed his arms like the matter was already settled. My mother kept repeating that I was overreacting and that family helps family. Meanwhile, the debt collectors would eventually come for me. Not Liana. My credit would collapse. My future would shrink. My name would carry the weight of $89,000 I never touched. For a moment, I actually considered staying silent. Because when your own parents threaten you, it messes with your head in ways you don't expect. But as my sister kept reading from that pathetic script, I noticed something strange. The paper was shaking in her hands. and she kept glancing toward the doorway behind me. Confused, I turned around, and that's when I realized she had just delivered their carefully prepared speech to a room. They cleared his throat, absolutely did. Not expect to be there. And in that instant, the entire plan they thought was foolproof began to crumble. The moment I turned around in that kitchen doorway, everything changed. Standing there wasn't just empty hallway space like my parents expected. It was my cousin Mateo and his wife Alina, both frozen mid-step with grocery bags in their hands. They had apparently stopped by unannounced to drop off something for my mom, and they had walked straight into the middle of my sister reading the speech out loud. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. My sister was still holding that piece of paper, her voice trailing off awkwardly after the line she had just read about how Karina agreed to help during financial hardship. Mateo slowly set the grocery bags down on the counter and looked at my father with the kind of expression that said he had just heard something he could never unhear. Did she just say she used Karina's identity for $89,000? He asked quietly. My mother immediately jumped in, her voice sharp and defensive, saying everyone was misunderstanding and that it was just a family arrangement. But the problem was the damage had already been done. They had given Liana a script to convince me to stay quiet, and she had just read that script to the worst possible audience. Mateo wasn't the type to ignore something like that. He worked in corporate compliance, the kind of job where fraud reports crossed his desk every week. He walked over, took the paper right out of my sister's shaking hand, and read it silently for a few seconds. His eyebrows rose higher with every line. Then he looked at me and asked the one question no one else in that house had bothered to ask. Karina, did you actually approve any of these loans? My answer came out instantly. No. That single word shifted the entire energy of the room. My father tried to recover by repeating the threat he had already made earlier, saying that if police got involved, they would simply say I had given permission. Mateo let out a short laugh that wasn't amused at all. He pointed at the paper and said, "You mean this prepared statement where she admits she used Karina's identity? You realize this makes things worse, right?" My parents looked stunned, like they hadn't considered that possibility for even a second. My sister started crying then, real panic replacing the robotic calm she had earlier. She kept saying she thought it was okay because Mom and Dad told her everything would work out. That was the moment I understood something important. The power dynamic had flipped. For hours, I had been the one cornered and threatened. Now, suddenly, there were witnesses who had heard the entire thing. Mateo took a picture of the script with his phone before handing it back, and my parents immediately started protesting. But it was too late. Evidence had just walked out of their own kitchen. The room erupted into arguing after that. My mom tried to blame me for dragging outsiders into family business, which was ironic considering I hadn't invited anyone. Mateo calmly told them identity theft involving $89,000 wasn't a family misunderstanding. It was fraud. Hearing someone say it out loud made my chest feel lighter for the first time that day. I realized something else, too. The fear my parents were counting on had disappeared. They thought threatening me would keep me silent, but their own plan had collapsed because my sister read her speech to the wrong room. I picked up the stack of loan documents from the table and walked toward the door. My father demanded to know where I was going. I turned back and said the sentence they had been so sure I would never say, "I'm fixing what you broke." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just left. Mateo followed me outside a few minutes later and told me if I decided to report it, he would back up everything he heard. That offer meant more than I could explain. For the first time since discovering the loans, I knew I wasn't alone. Clear as throat. Over the next week, I filed reports with the banks, flagged the loans as identity theft, and submitted copies of everything, including a written statement about the script my sister had read. Once the lenders realized there were witnesses and documentation, the investigation moved quickly. Suddenly, The same family that had threatened me was calling nonstop, asking me to handle it privately. But the truth was simple. They had already handled it privately when they decided to take $89,000 under my name. The consequences were just catching up now. The last message my sister sent before the investigators contacted her simply said she never expected the script to backfire. But that's the funny thing about lies. They fall apart the moment they reach the wrong ears. My parents thought they had designed the perfect pressure tactic, a speech that would scare me into silence. Instead, it became the exact piece of evidence that exposed everything. And that's how the plan to swindle $89,000 from me collapsed in the most unexpected way possible. Because my sister read the script to the wrong room. If this story shocked you and you want to hear more real revenge stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel Core Revenge Tales so you don't miss the next.